Poet's death still troubles Spain. The murder of the poet and playwright Federico Garcia Lorca by nationalists on the 19th of August 1936 remains one of Spain's open wounds. A man ahead of his time, he lived in a Spain that was going backwards. The most gitano, gypsy, of poets, a label which, by the way, he hated, he was also the most international. His evocation of the folklore of Spain should be understood as a distillation of the essence of Spain through the eyes and pen of a man who knew no frontiers. I sing to Spain, and I feel her to the core of my being, but above all I am a man of the world and a brother of everyone. He was born on the 5th of June, 1898, in the village of Fuente Vaqueros in the province of Granada. When he died 38 years later, the legacy of his work and personality had already guaranteed him a place in the pantheon of immortals. When you go to Granada, and the surrounding area is still possible to see some of the elements which inspired Lorca's work, the light reflected on the white houses and the albacin, the clear air of the Sierra, old women dressed in black sitting in doorways, or a group of walking to Mass on Sundays, the religious silence of siesta time, the raucous sound of a group of gypsies singing flamenco on Sacramonte. Even today, Granada is a small village. We all know each other's families, and in this sense, much of the Granada where Federico lived has not changed. The speaker is Federico Jimenez, the director of the Hotel Reina Cristina, the former house of the poet Luis Rosales. That is where Lorca took refuge and from where he was abducted by phalangists and taken to his death. Through this very door they took him out and put him in a lorry with other political suspects. The people who saw this do not want to forget about it even today. Old people still prefer to forget and not open old wounds because they still haven't completely healed, says Mr. Jimenez. Lorca's body has still not been found. Personal effects. His birthplace, Fuente Vaqueros, is less than 40 minutes by car from Granada. Today the house where he was born is a small museum where some of the personal objects and fragments of Lorca's life are preserved. An old gramophone plays some of Lorca's musical compositions. The museum displays a cradle, school certificates, and a death certificate signed by his parents. They had no choice but to sign, said Paco, the curator. Even though the body was never found, they had to sign, as this was the only possible way to make Federico's death official. On the upper floor, posters, press clippings, letters, school qualifications, and other personal objects give me an insight into the most influential poet and dramatist of the 20th century. Paco takes me to a television screen. He switches it on, and we see Lorca in the only existing film recording of him. It is in black and white, and Lorca appears always smiling, helping with the set or performing to the camera. He comes across as a man full of energy. Federico was radiant, and he transmitted this energy to all who were around him, Paco tells me. Another poet friend of Lorca, Jorge Guillen, used to say that when Lorca was nearby, the weather was neither hot nor cold, rather it was Federico weather. Such was the state of intoxication caused by his presence that it even made you forget the temperature. At a time when in Spain hardly anyone traveled, Lorca lived in New York when he wrote his acclaimed Poet in New York. He went to Argentina, and he spent time in Cuba, where he was inspired to write, "In a coach of black water I will go to Santiago." Freethinker. He was a man ahead of his time, a restless traveler, a homosexual, and completely avant-garde. Catholic, communist, anarchist, libertarian, traditionalist, monarchist. This is how he once described himself. Federico never had any definite political affiliation, which is one of the reasons why some people believe that his assassination owed more to personal rather than political motives. Envy is a very important factor in Lorca's death, says Ian Gibson, Lorca's biographer and an expert on modern Spanish history. Lorca was envied for his talent. He had money and he was successful. When the military took power, his execution was only a matter of time. A successful liberal homosexual could not be tolerated in Franco's Spain. He was killed a few kilometers from Fuente Vaqueros, between Vinsnar and Alfacar. I asked a local villager, aged 80, if he remembered those times. Many lorries arrived here with prisoners to be shot, and they buried them over there, close to the ravine. A shot in the back of the head and into the ditch. In one of these lorries, they took Federico Garcia, along with a school teacher and two banderilleros, participated in bullfighting. It is believed the four were shot and then thrown into a common grave. In search of the past. Today, Francisco Galadi and Nieves Galindo, grandchildren of the executed banderilleros, are trying to identify the remains of their grandfathers and to clarify the mystery once and for all. They are buried some 2.5 meters from the stone monument erected in the Federico Garcia Lorca Park, just next to the olive tree, says Francisco Galadi. Now they have appealed to the courts to get permission to exhume the bodies. However, Lorca's family is opposed to the exhumation and wants them to leave the bodies where they are. We are not going to find out anything new by exhuming the grave where Federico is buried, said Laura Lorca, the poet's niece and director of the Garcia Lorca Association. He was buried there. Those were terrible circumstances. Today, for us, this place is a cemetery where he rests, alongside hundreds of others who, like him, were assassinated. We want the circumstances of his death to be respected, and this place protected from commercial speculation and morbid curiosity. The mystery continues. Meanwhile, the mystery surrounding Lorca's death continues. The refusal by Lorca's family to solve it by opening the grave increases speculation. Some people say that Lorca's body is no longer there, that the family disinterred it during the war and buried it in the family estate in Granada. Perhaps this explains the insistence on not opening the grave on the part of the family, Gibson says. In some part of this park dedicated to his memory lie the poet's remains. While the dispute over the exhumation of the grave continues in the courts, here, surrounded by trees and the mountains in the background, rests a man whose crime was to be free, at a time in Spain's history when to call for freedom was to knock on the executioner's door. 70 years after his death, his voice is just as alive as on that 19th August night when bullets tried to silence it.